The Berserker Soul card is a card used by the Pharaoh in the iconic scene where he goes overboard and defeats Weevil, but he doesn't stop attacking when his life points hit 0. However, the card has a big difference between the anime and the real TCG. First and foremost, the main difference is that in the anime, you have to discard your entire hand to activate the effect. In the real world, you actually have to inflict damage before discarding your entire hand. Then both of these cards have you excavate cards from your deck until you hit a non-monster card. And now the biggest difference between the cards. In the anime, you actually reuse your same monster to attack your opponent. In the TCG, you actually burn your opponent for 500. And you also have the restriction that you can only do it up to 7 times. And the very last restriction is that you can only use it once per turn. All those changes were obviously made so that we could avoid any FTK or OTK decks with this card. Cardiff Sanctum is a card that would have been absolutely broken if it ever had its anime effect. The card says, each player draws until they have 6 cards in their hand. Now you can imagine that this type of effect could not be made into the real card game, since it generates an insane amount of advantage. The player playing this card could technically just set all his cards and then proceed to activate this card to draw until they have 6 and the opponent draws like 1 or 2 cards. And unfortunately, the real card says that you have to remove from play all cards from your hand and side of the field to draw 2 cards. While drawing 2 cards is a pretty good effect, the cost for activating the effect is not worth it unless you have specific cards that activate when they're banished. Even then, there's too much of a disadvantage when playing this card. Card of Demise is another one of those cards that has been heavily nerfed from the anime. In the anime, you draw until you have 5 cards, and after your 5th turn, you send all your cards to the graveyard. Now it's easy to see why they heavily nerfed it, since the real life version makes you draw 3 cards, makes your opponent take no damage, and sends your cards to the graveyard at the end of the turn. You can only activate it once, and you can't even special summon. Even after all those restrictions, this card was limited, since it was a very powerful way of drawing cards. Elemental Hero Bubbleman is a card that has seen a lot of play in the game's history, but it probably would have seen way more play if they hadn't changed this little detail on the card's effect from the anime. Both the real life version and the anime effect say that you can special summon this card if it's the only card in your hand, and then you can draw 2 cards. The restriction to draw 2 cards are different. In real life, you need to have no cards on the field and in the hand. However, in the anime, you just needed to have an empty field and you can draw your 2 cards. It did not matter if you had or not cards in your hand. A small change, but a big difference. Samsara Lotus is another one of those cards where a small change in its anime effect made all the difference in the real world. Both cards says that during the end phase, you can special summon this card in attack position, and that the controller of this card takes 1000 damage during each of their standby phases. However, the biggest difference is in the restriction. In the anime, the card can revive itself without any restrictions. But in the real card game, they added a restriction similar to Treeborn Frog, where you need to control no spell and trap cards to activate its effect. This card is already banned in the card game, since you can create an FTK with it using Topological Bomber Dragon. So if it had its anime effect, it probably would have been banned sooner. Dark Rebellion Seas Dragon is a card used by Yugioh in the Arc 5 anime. However, its effects differs from the TCG and the anime. In Arc 5, you could detach only one Xyz material to activate its effects, but you can only target level 5 or higher monsters. The attack boost also lasts until the end of the turn. In the TCG, you can target any monster on the field, but you have to detach 2 materials to activate its effects, and the attack boost stays forever. I have no idea why they made these changes, since both effects are pretty average at best. Power Wall is a trap card used by Zane Truesdale, also known as the Kaiser in the Japanese dub, in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, and its effect reads that during damage calculation you can send 1 card from the top of your deck to the graveyard for every 500 damage you take, thus negating the damage you would take. So if you would take 8000 points of damage, you can send 16 cards from the deck to the graveyard. Now the anime version was a lot better, since instead of being 500 points, it will be 100 points. Nowadays, a lot of cards use effects in the graveyard, so it obviously had to be nerfed, because we don't want every player to be able to send more than half their deck to the graveyard. Curry Bandit is a card used by the Pharaoh in the Seal of Orichalcos arc. In the real life card game, it says that after you have normal summoned this card during the end phase, you can tribute it and then excavate the top 5 cards from your deck and choose one spell or trap card, and the rest of the cards are sent to the graveyard. Now in the anime it has a similar effect, but it is much stronger. In the anime, you could tribute this card during either player's turn, then you draw 5 cards, and you send all your monster cards to the graveyard. A very powerful effect since most spell and trap cards are very powerful in the early states of the game. It does also, however, have a summoning restriction, since you can only special summon it with the effect of Kuribe, another Kuribo monster. Formula Synchron is a card used by Yusei Fudo in the 5Ds anime, and it is used to summon Shooting Star Dragon. Now Formula Synchron reads that when this is synchro summon, you can draw 1 card, and that once per chain, during your opponent's turn, you can synchro summon using this card and other cards you control. Now the effect in the anime is completely different. It really just says once per turn you can draw 1 card. So it is not when it is summoned that you draw a card, it is literally every turn you have him on the field. And his other effect seems to be missing. I guess it is because you have to achieve the state of clear mind to synchro summon during your opponent's turn. Arai's Pendulum Dragon is Yuya Sakaki's ace monster from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 anime. Since it's a pendulum monster, it has 2 effects. Its pendulum effects reads that damage involving pendulum monsters is reduced to 0, and at the end phase, you can add 1 pendulum monster with 1500 attack or less by destroying this card in the pendulum zone, and its monster effect doubles any damage you inflict with this card. Now there are some slight differences from the anime. In the anime, it's missing its second pendulum effect, so Yuya cannot search monsters from the deck, and the monster effect restricts its application to level 5 or higher monsters. It seems the real life card is the better one of the 2 versions. Number 39, Utopia, is Yuma Tsukumo's ace monster in the Zexal anime, and one of the first Xyz monsters to be released. Its effect is that when a monster declares an attack, you can detach 1 material from this card and negate the attack. Then, if it has no material and an attack is declared on him, you have to destroy it. Now, the anime version is much better. In the anime, it can only be destroyed by other number cards, and it can still negate attacks by detaching 1 material from it. So it doesn't destroy itself when it has no material. So for some reason, they made it much weaker in the Speedor Terratop is a card used by Yugioh in the Arc 5 anime. And its effect is that if you control no monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And when this card is summoned, either normal or special summon, you can add 1 Speedor monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. Now this card has seen a lot of play before, since it is essentially a free rank 3 Xyz or a link 2 monster. Now over in the anime, its only effect is to be able to special summon itself. You can't even normal summon this card, so they really buffed him up in the actual card game. Crush Card Virus is a card used by Seto Kaiba in the Duel Monsters anime, and its effect is to tribute 1 dark monster with 1000 attack or less, then you can destroy monsters from your opponent's hands with 1500 attack or more. Then your opponent chooses if he wants to destroy up to 3 monsters from their deck. Now this is the errata version, meaning that it had a different effect before. It used to say that you destroy all your opponent's monster with 1500 attack or more until your opponent's third end phase, and you had to check if your opponent drew a monster with 1500 attack or more. Now the anime version is completely busted, since it destroys monsters with 1500 attack or more from your opponent's hand and your opponent's deck. This is probably one of the most absurd effects there is in the Yu-Gi-Oh story, and obviously its real life counterpart had to be severely nerfed to be even playable, and even then they had to nerf it another time with the errata. Elemental Hero Stratos is a card used by Jaden Yuki in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga, and its effect from the manga is completely different from real life, and also much weaker. In the manga, you have the attack of this card, and then it can attack directly. In real life, this card has become such an iconic card because it is so useful. When it is summoned, you can either destroy spell or trap cards, or add 1 hero monsters from your deck to your hand, and it isn't even once per turn. It's a good thing they buffed this card, otherwise I don't think anyone would play it. Red Resonator is a card used by Jack Atlas in the Arc 5 anime. When this card is normal summon, you can special summon a level 4 or lower monsters from your hand, and if this card is special summon, you can target another monster on the field and gain life points equal to its attack. Now its anime counterpart is actually much weaker, because the only effect it has is the life point gain, and even at that, you need to target 1 synchro monster on the field. Thankfully, its real life counterpart is a lot more useful. Fluffle Bear is a card used by Sora in the Arc 5 anime, and its anime effect is to be able to tribute itself to search a polymerization card in the graveyard and add it to your hand. Thankfully, the real-life counterpart has an extra effect that synergizes with its own archetype. Extra effect is to be able to send it to the graveyard from your hand and send one Toy Vendor spell card from your deck to your spell and trap zones. This extra effect makes it a key card in the archetype. A Chichi at Ignister is a card used by Ai in the Vrains anime, and its effect is much weaker than its real-life counterpart. In the anime, its effect is to banish itself, to destroy a monster you control, after damage calculation, if a fire attribute monster is destroyed by battle. And the real-life version of this card does a lot for the archetype, because it has a searcher effect when it's summoned to the field. And the second effect is similar to the anime effect, except it's for any Cyber's monster. I'm glad they buffed Ai's archetype, since he is a very prominent character in the Vrains anime.